honourable friend for securing this debate on what is a hugely important issue, because this SEND provision touches on every part of education, from early years all the way through to FE and HE, not just for the vulnerable children who need the support, but for everybody else, as it increasingly impacts on schools' core budgets and spending as well. With very limited time, I want to touch on one specific issue. I use Nottinghamshire, my own council, as the example, but it's a wider issue. Nottinghamshire County Council have a good reputation for this kind of support. They're growing problems, and they lose out compared to the national average in terms of funding, making it impossible to sustain the level of support. Compared to statistical neighbours, they receive £7 million a year less for putting forward the same services. And they're punished for having historically been inclusive, keeping children with SEND in mainstream schools as far as possible, pushing the budgets down from their own budgets to individual schools, meaning that they've historically spent less, and that works against them in the funding formula. So by taking the right educational decisions for pupils, they now get less funding. And that's not right, and it's not sustainable. I said SEN's funding impacts across all areas of education. There's been a lot of talk about school funding. Of course, increasing proportions of those budgets are spent topping up gaps in the SEND support. So I welcome the announcement at the end of last year there'd be more money across the next 2 financial years, but we need to do more. And I know my right honourable friend, the Minister, knows this. I know that she's making that case, and we all in this room have a duty to make sure the Chancellor understands the storm that is brewing around SEND funding. Well, I think Nottinghamshire County Council have taken the right approach. They aim to be inclusive, they aim to give the funding and the autonomy to schools wherever possible, because they are the ones best placed to understand their pupils, to be able to give those pupils a voice and a say in the care and support that they receive, as well as reducing the costs and the bureaucracy. So it's all the more frustrating that they and many other councils like them around the country are now hit financially for taking the right educational decisions. But I urge the Government to make sure this is a priority. I know the Minister is aware of stats showing the growth of SEND spending in post-16, in particular in her own area, rising by huge numbers that simply are not going to be sustainable without more help. So the spending review is hugely important, and I would urge her and everybody in this room to make the case to the Treasury about that, because over the coming months we need to ensure this funding for the long term and make sure we're properly investing in this SEND provision.